Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to welcome you to our webinar this afternoon on empowering youth entrepreneurs in the food industry to adopt good manufacturing sector practices. Before we move into our session for this afternoon, just a few house rules. Just to let you know that mics will be muted for the duration of the webinar to allow presenters to present. Questions will be facilitated at the end. However, if you have a question and we are not able to get it at the end, I have shared my email address, Shana Ramasabihari, and Mr. Nikki Braffett, who you can email with your questions. You can submit your questions on the chat function at the end of the presentations when we start the question and answer session. My apologies, I did not introduce myself. My name is Shana Ramasabihari. I'm an industry specialist at the Ministry of Trade and Industry. And I am very pleased to see the turnout for this afternoon's session. We have quite a number of notable speakers this afternoon, and I'm very excited that we have such a good turnout for this session because we are talking about a very important standard for the food industry, the good manufacturing sector practices. So as we continue, I'm going to pass you on now to Mr. Michael James, Director Industry at the Ministry of Trade and Industry, who will provide some opening remarks to everyone. Mr. James?
Mr. Shedron Collins, General Manager, Youth Business, Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. Fayaz Khan, Director, Chemistry, Food and Drugs Division, Ministry of Health. Mr. Neil Rampasad, Chief Public Health Inspector, Public Health Division, Ministry of Health. Mr. Christian Maraj, Manager, Capacity Building of exporTT Limited. Fellow presenters, youth entrepreneurs, good afternoon. I am pleased to welcome you to our webinar on empowering youth entrepreneurs to adopt good manufacturing practices in the food industry. This webinar is a collaborative effort of the Ministry of Trade, exporTT Limited, the Trinidad and Tobago Bureau of Standards, the Ministry of Health, and Youth Business Trinidad and Tobago Limited. And it's designed to educate youth entrepreneurs on the importance of food safety. Therefore, I would like to take this opportunity, firstly, to commend YBTT and Mr. Shedron Collins for its work on empowering youth entrepreneurs, especially during these challenging times of COVID-19 pandemic. Your organization's commitment and dedication will certainly redound to the benefit of our economy of Trinidad and Tobago. In so doing, the government of Trinidad and Tobago recognizes that the creativity, vitality, and vigor of our youth entrepreneurs can help us navigate the challenges brought on by the coronavirus pandemic. You, young entrepreneurs, are historically more entrepreneurial than ever before, starting up twice as many businesses as previous generations. You are characterized by your willingness to take risk, your innovativeness, and proactivity in business environments. In so doing, the importance of youth entrepreneurs cannot be underestimated. And this importance of youth entrepreneurs is critical to the recovery of our economy. The Ministry of Trade and Industry and its key agencies are committed to working with you, the youth entrepreneurs, to enhance your competitiveness. This is aligned with government's development strategy 2016-2030, which we refer to as Vision 2030. And we specifically relate to theme 4, which speaks to building globally competitive businesses. Let me take a few minutes to indicate that the agencies present here today are key players in the entrepreneurship ecosystem and could provide you with the support needed to grow your business and become more competitive, both locally and internationally. This webinar is one such initiative where we are creating awareness of the good manufacturing practices standard and the business benefits of implementing these requirements in your company. In light of its direct link to human health, companies that manufacture food products must meet good manufacturing practices standard in order to ensure that foods are produced under hygienic conditions. It is also important to note that adopting the GMP standard will ensure that your company complies with our national requirements for food safety. It will also increase awareness of production safety among your employees and cement your company's reputation as a supplier of safe food and we cannot underestimate this point. Obviously, this will in turn improve your competitive edge in the market against your local and international competitors. The adoption of the GMP also lays the foundation for certification in the International Food Safety Standards as hazard analysis and critical control points, which we call HACCP, and ISO 22000. Let me add again that we have some notable presenters at our session today who will provide you with valuable information that you can later take to expand and improve your business. Let me begin with Trinidad and Tobago Bureau of Standards, the institution which would have developed the good manufacturing practices. And let me introduce Ms. Adrienne Stewart, who is the Standards Officer at the Trinidad and Tobago Bureau of Standards. And she will give you an overview of the standard and requirements for producing safe food. We also have a representative from the private sector, Ms. Sharon Chotelal, Managing Director of Habanero Pepper, who will go into further details on the benefit of implementing GMP standard in your company. I would also like to acknowledge Mr. Fayaz Khan, Director of Chemistry, Food and Drugs Division of the Ministry of Health, who will be presenting on the role of the CFDD. And Mr. Khan is a critical person in terms of food safety. So we need to be taking notes and writing emails to Mr. Khan as soon as he's finished. We also have Mr. Neil Rampasad, Chief Public Health Inspector, another critical person of the Ministry of Health, who will be speaking on the role of Public Health Division. And finally, but not least, we have Mr. Christian Maraj, the Manager Capacity Building exporTT Limited, who will be providing information on the agency's export-related programs that can propel your company to expansion into regional markets. So therefore, in closing, I encourage participants to make full use of valuable information being presented. And I wish you a productive session and continued success in your entrepreneurial endeavors. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. James, for your words of welcome. And like Mr. James said, we are very excited to have so many youth entrepreneurs here with us today. We think you all are a huge part of what we do to diversify our economy and to take us forward. So moving straight into our presentations, we now have Ms. Adrienne Stewart from the Trinidad and Tobago Bureau of Standards, who would give a presentation on an overview of the good manufacturing sector practices. Adrienne?
Okay, thank you, Shauna. Let me share my screen. Everyone is seeing my screen and everyone is hearing me, okay? Great, thank you. All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. A warm welcome to you and thank you for being here. My name is Adrienne Stewart, as Shana would have indicated, and I'm a Standards Officer at the Trinidad and Tobago Bureau of Standards. And today I'm going to be talking about good manufacturing practices with particular reference to the National Standard, TTS 642, on good manufacturing practices for the food industry. My presentation covers two topics: GMP defined and GMP objectives. So I'm just going to give you a little background before I get into the full presentation, just to tell you how the standard was developed and why. So the need for the standard was identified by exporTT, as there was no focused information on national foundational prerequisites on which to build and assure food quality. And, oh, I'm sorry. Something seems to be running along without me, right? To assure food quality and food safety. And this would have been around the time when the United States was developing their Food Safety Modernization Act and were about to implement it. This would have resulted in changes in the regulatory framework for federal food inspections and therefore affect inspections in Trinidad and Tobago, and actually had affected inspections in Trinidad and Tobago because quite a few of our manufacturers had poor outcomes to the inspections that were performed by the US FDA under the FISMA. Additionally, Canada was also looking to implement the Safe Food for Canadian Act. So this would have affected Trinidad and Tobago quite tremendously as two of our major trading partners. I'm going to scroll back up because my presentation seems to be running ahead of me, as I said. I'm not sure why that is, but anyway, we'll get it straightened out. So I'm going to define GMP, and I'm going to talk about GMP for a little bit. What are good manufacturing practices, or GMPs, as we say in brief? Well, they're a combination of essential operational, technical, and managerial practices, which are necessary to enable food establishments to consistently produce safe food. That is, GMPs are the minimum requirements in the food manufacturing or food processing business or establishment, which is necessary to produce safe food. It's all about producing safe foods. And then by extension, you get your good quality foods in there, but at the core of it is your production of safe foods. GMPs then are called prerequisite programs because they're the minimum requirements that you need for all regulations or standards which are related to food safety and quality systems. There are other prerequisite programs. You have current good manufacturing practices. You'll see this in the literature. It's basically the same thing as your good manufacturing practices. You'll see good agricultural practices. You'll see good hygienic practices. They're all prerequisite programs that you need in order to establish your food safety systems. If you don't have your prerequisite programs in place, then it's difficult to move on to a more complex system, which you will require if you're going to export and if you're going to meet all your regulatory requirements and so on. So from your prerequisite programs, you move to your HACCPs, which is Hazard Analysis Critical Control Point, which most persons are familiar with. But there is also an advancement on HACCP, which is called HARPC, which is Hazard Analysis Risk-Based Preventive Controls, all right? And if you have your PRPs and then you have your HACCP or your HARPC in place, then you move into your food safety systems, and then from there you move into your food quality and safety management systems, which are your ISO, your FSSC, your BRC, and so on, which are necessary usually for exports to the United States, to Canada, to the EU. So let's look at the region and let's put this into context of what's happening with regards to food safety. There are over 200 diseases which are spread by food. And we know that foodborne illnesses can be debilitating, and we know that there's social and economic costs to the individual, the family, the workplace, the healthcare system, and ultimately to the country from foodborne illnesses. So now I've told you that there are over 200 diseases which are spread by food. And in 2020, which was just last year, CARFA approximated that there are 1 in 49 persons that fall ill every year from foodborne diseases in the Caribbean. And when we have mass gatherings like cricket or festivals, carnival, it moves to 1 in every 11. Fortunately, now we're not having mass gatherings, but I'm sure that sometime in the future, we're going to start having mass gatherings again, and that number goes up. The cost to the region is about $21 million US. Just think what CARICOM countries could do with that money, if it wasn't spent or lost because of foodborne illnesses. But most importantly, everyone deserves to have safe food, right? And this can be achieved through GMPs. So the application of GMPs and the application through the use of the national standard is expected to meet 3 broad objectives. 1, to comply with regulatory and standards requirements. 2, to assure consumer protection and satisfaction. And 3, to build business sustainability. So let's talk about the first one, which is being compliant with regulatory requirements. What are our regulatory requirements in Trinidad and Tobago? Well, there is the Food and Drugs Act. There's a Public Health Ordinance. These will be the major ones that we need to comply with. There are others which will affect food production and food safety in a more indirect way, but the Food and Drug Act and the Public Health Ordinance are the most important ones. And what these GMPs do is that they help to be able to meet those requirements in the ordinance and in the Food and Drug Act by spelling out those areas which need attention and for which is required in a more elaborate way so that you are able to comply with the Act. So these, the organization, Chemistry, Food and Drug, the Public Health Division of the Ministry of Health, are all, both together give regulatory oversight over food safety. And we have representatives with us here today who will be speaking further on the matter. If we're going to be exporting, then we need to meet the regulatory requirements in the countries to which we export. And I'm just showing you a little brief of a diagram on foods from Trinidad and Tobago, which were rejected from the US market. And this isn't so long ago. The data is up to just last month, May 2021. And it shows that 67% of all of these foods that were rejected because of adulteration, which goes back to your GMP measures. Either they're not implemented, they're not monitored, or they were not being reviewed. The good news is that the figures have improved over the previous 3 years. So it means that we are learning and we're applying what we have learned. Okay, so the next objective, let's look a little bit closer. What does it cover? And in this objective, I'm going to be talking more about the standard. So the scope of the standard lays out what the standard covers. And the scope says the standard establishes minimum requirements for food safety and quality system in food processing, manufacture, handling, packaging, storage, transport, or holding for any sector of the food chain where food is offered for sale or supply for public consumption. So we see that it's very all-encompassing. Now, the requirements of this standard are generic and they apply to all food establishments involved in the processing or manufacture of foods, regardless of the size or complexity of the operations, or whether the output is raw material or final product. The standard does not apply to sectors of the food chain where the output of primary agricultural production and where it's sold whole directly to consumer, and which may include packaging at the point of sale. So if you're doing dashing bush and you cut it up and package it, then this standard does not apply to you. A different standard would apply to you. So it doesn't matter if you're operating a coffee shop or you're processing dried cassava flakes or you're making low salt sausages, the standard can apply to you. What are the required elements of the standard? I'm just going to list them because there are quite a few of them. There are regulatory requirements, and we just spoke about that and saying that you have to meet those. Requirements for premises, design, construction, and maintenance of internal spaces, hygienic facilities, utility systems, equipment and utensils, personal hygiene, pest control, storage and distribution, consumer information, procurement or purchasing, traceability and recall, allergen management, security, which is biovigilance and bioterrorism, and documentation, personnel training, and then you may or may not have your HACCP implementation. The system requires management involvement. And sometimes when we say management, people believe that, oh, that doesn't apply to me, I'm a young entrepreneur. You are the owner of the business, so you are part of the management of the business. Resource management, resource input and management, product planning and design, and system verification. That means you review your systems and you make sure that they are working. Two of the most important elements of GMP, which most persons are quite familiar with, would be personal hygiene and sanitation, cleaning and sanitation. And we're very familiar with personal hygiene and having to have hygienic facilities for hand washing, changing of clothes, having policies in place. How do we treat with the employees if they're ill, if they're injured? How do we make them work or not work? Can they handle food or not? And they shouldn't be, but I'm sure Mr. Rampersad will be speaking a little bit more about this. What is important here, though, is to ensure that your employees are trained. Cleaning and sanitation, you have to start off with a good design and construction for your equipment. If your equipment is poorly designed or poorly constructed and you have crevices and corners where food can stick, then it doesn't matter you're cleaning. It means either you have to clean more thoroughly, take more time to do it, use particular reagents or so on, or cleaning agents, or it will just not clean properly. And so that's a big one that you need to consider. You have to have your maintenance schedules, sanitizing schedules, and ensure that you have work instructions for if it's for you or if you have more than one person employed in your establishment. So the last and third objective is to build business sustainability, and a business can stand up so that your business can stand up to the test of time. It can support its employees. If and when you do get employees, besides yourself, you can produce a profit and you could contribute to the national economy. And how do we do that? The implementation of GMPs allows a manufacturer or processor to design according to individual needs, because not all food businesses are the same. Its implementation achieves efficient practices that protect the product, and these practices will include management owner involvement, clearly defining all processes, having written and implemented procedures and instructions, training employees in procedures, monitoring, verifying, and validating processes, and reviewing those processes. Now, it seems like a lot. However, what is important is to plan it out. So now it's COVID time. Most food establishments, some are closed. Most of those who offer food directly to the public are closed. Now is a good time to work out, think out, plan out, and write down what you believe your policies, procedures, or your challenges that you will meet in the implementation of your GMP. Establish your standard operating procedures, your sanitary standard operating procedures, and your work instructions. It may sound like a lot of work, but remember I said the complexity of your operation matters. So some establishments operate at a more complex level than others, and so the simpler your business, the simpler will be your written program. All right, so don't get turned off by this. It's just to help you to eventually see if you are meeting your goals and your objectives, right? And then you do something that we call do. So you plan and then you implement what you've written down. You train your staff, you keep your records, you do your own individual internal inspections, and then you check to see if it's working. If it's not working, then you act on it. Do you need to change your implementation, some part of your implementation, or do you need to change a part of your written program? And you'll be able to know this when you go through your system and see what's causing your problems or your challenges. So the effect is that GMP is beneficial to any business in that's a food establishment. It improves your processes, and it improves your production environment. It improves the customer public perception of your business. And a huge byproduct of all of that is employee satisfaction. And of course, it impacts your bottom line. So in conclusion, few parting statements: know what is required by the regulations, national regulations, and seek advice, seek information, speak to as many people as you can for your business support organizations, talk to the public health division, talk to chemistry, food and drug personnel, and get as much information as you can and be thorough in your application. Thank you so much. I hope that we all would have learned something today and that it was useful to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adrian, for that very interesting presentation. And I want participants to note what Adrian mentioned regarding the 200 different diseases that are caused by food, and then every 1 in 49 persons that were infected. This is the reason why it's important to pay attention to our manufacturing practices to ensure that we produce food that is safe for human consumption. And to go more into the benefits to your company of implementing GMPs, I would now like to invite the Managing Director of Habanero Pepper Sauce Company Limited, Ms. Sharon Chotlal, to give her take on the benefits of implementing GMPs in your company.
Right. Hi, good morning, everyone.
Hi, Sharon. Yes, we're hearing you.
Can you see me as well?
Yes, we are. You can go ahead. Thank you.
Here. Okay, thanks. So good morning again to everyone, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to say a few words this afternoon on the benefits of implementing the GMP standards. And we'll go an extra step to say food safety manual, because they sort of work hand in hand in a business. To really capture the magnitude and the importance of this is going to take more than just a few minutes. So I am going to deviate a little bit from just the benefits to stress a little bit more on the importance of it, because if you know, you're all future entrepreneurs, and I look back from when I now started, you know, it helped me when somebody spoke to me in layman's terms of the importance of getting certain things done, because then you can see the true benefits of it, right? So first of all, to be able to sell in the local market, as the Bureau of Standard person would have just Stuart explained, you need to get your GMPs and certain certification and all of these things. All of these are to ensure that what you are producing is safe for human consumption. That's the first thing that everybody is trying to achieve. They just want to make sure that the food that you produce is safe. And all of you are looking for export to eventually get into export, and you maybe to start in the local market. So in the local market, you have to get your free sales certificate, and sorry, excuse me. And to get that, you need to get your inspection certificate of your premises. You need to get your staff trained for food handling. You need to get your products tested. And all of these things are to ensure, again, that what you are going to sell is safe. And then if you're looking to do export, the basic requirement to get into the export market is your GMP, which is your good manufacturing practices, and your food safety manual. They work hand in hand to ensure that the food that you're producing is safe. And these are the basic things you will need for entry into the US market. And according to the product that you are selling, you might need to get additional certification. For example, in my company, we have 2 people that are what you call PCQIs, which are Preventative Control Qualified Individuals. And they are the one that sort of guard and guide the food safety manual and your GMPs to ensure that you are doing and practicing the correct standards with regards to food safety. The quickest way to convince you of how important this is to let you know some of what I think, anyhow, from my experience, to let you know what are some of the things that could happen by failing to meet these standards, right? Your products could be detained and destroyed if you're looking to export, local or international. You can have a recall that nobody wants to have their products recalled. It is a huge loss, a huge blow to your business, and you could be blacklisted. In the worst case scenario, and this is very important, an individual, a human being, can get sick, and it could be a baby, a child, an adult. They can get very sick and even die. And there's a lot of records on file that you can check to see some of the big establishments that make food where things have gone wrong because of certain failures in their whole system. So it's very important to make sure that you do practice have good safety practices when you're producing food. Now, it's a lot of work involved. But the good news is it's very possible, it's very achievable, because there are a lot of support systems in place locally now to help entrepreneurs. You have the Bureau of Standards, you have exporTT, you have the labs, and there are other options that are financial options that are available through the Ministry of Trade and so on. Just be prepared for the reality of all of it, that you're going to have to do a lot of work. It doesn't happen overnight. This is my 8th year in my business, and I am still learning. I'm still being educated. Right now I'm enrolled in a training, which is a requirement for one of my products that I'm sending to the States. And that training is not even available in Trinidad. It's at one of the universities in the state, and I'm enrolled in it right now. So it's an ongoing thing. And one thing I want to add, having your GMPs and having your food safety manual is not the end of it. Your food safety manual and your GMP it's a working document, and it's a living document. So it's gonna change as you go along, right? A little advice that I probably just want to impart on you as you start this journey is, have a plan. Have a written plan. Start up with a basic draft and just think it through as thoroughly as you can from the beginning. And know exactly what you want to make, how you're going to make it, what shelf life you want to achieve, where you intend to get your raw materials from, how you intend to store it before, during, after, what type of packaging you're going to be using, your labor requirement. Your labor requirement in Trinidad is different to the US and Europe. You have to be aware of things like allergens, additives, even preservatives. What is allowed in Trinidad, what is allowed in the Caribbean, what is allowed. Know your market, because every market have different regulations. The United States have 8 allergens, while Europe might have 13 allergens. All of these things have to be incorporated into your food safety plan. And then you have to document your process, your standards, how you're going to be, what systems are you going to put in place to ensure that at each point that it's being managed properly and effectively. And so it's from farm to fork, right? Know how every step of the way, from even when the distributor purchases your product, how it's going to be stored there. When the end user purchases your product, how are they going to use your product? How are they going to store your product? From if it's a bottle and it might have 50 servings in it, or 10 servings, how is that product going to be good from the first serving to the last servings? All of these things that you have to take into consideration when you are looking to start exporting food. And then you have to have, okay, what are your policies? What are your procedures? What are your checklists? How are you going to ensure that at each step of it, that it's being monitored? And as you grow, things are going to change. There are so many things that as my business have grown, I've had to change, so that GMP and that food safety manual it's, as I call it, it's a working document, and it's your guide. It's the foundation for how your business is going to grow. And I would say, out of everything in my business, because as an entrepreneur, you have to manage your HR, your IT, your marketing, your finance, your social media, and so much more, and the training and your employees. The food safety, I would say, is the most important aspect of your business. That is the foundation. Once you have that working and you have it where you can train staff and keep it going, you need a good team to support you on this, because you can't do it alone. So your staff also has to be trained. But once you have that going, it gives you a certain amount of confidence to go out and sell. Because when you can show your customers, your potential customers locally, which includes all your supermarkets and your specialty shops and so on, and the health shops, especially if you're looking to get a health food, they want to know that you have things in place to ensure to back up what you are trying to sell them. And when you reach to the international market, you're going to have to prove these things, right? And you prove it by, you get inspected, you might have to do independent audits. And the first thing they're going to want to see is your records to show that you have been maintaining all of these standards that you have put in place. It's not something you just do and that's the end of it. It is what is going to guide your business growth. And I can vouch for the importance of it because I have started to export. I was selling online, which was selling directly to customers. But now that I have a distributor in New York and Miami and even St. Martin, and I'm looking at signing another distributor right now. And that's how come I had to enroll in another training, because they're asking to provide evidence of certain things to show that I have met, our company have met certain standards. And having met those standards is now opening up new markets for me. So it has benefited me tremendously, and it is also going to benefit you once you do things and you set it up correctly from the beginning. So I just want to stress on the importance of that, and it's also good. It helps you to transition into other training and other standards that you will need to do as your company starts to get larger and you take on more employees. Basically, that's it in a nutshell. I know I just had about 10 minutes to talk. I'll try to keep it within that time frame. So as I said, it is possible, it's achievable. Just put in the work and do the right work from the beginning, and you will benefit in the end. So thank you, and I hope I have imparted some knowledge to all of you that will benefit you in the future as an entrepreneur. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sharon. I think that was very informative for entrepreneurs. I want to draw attention to something that Sharon said. She said food safety is the most important aspect of your business. And this is a point that we continuously drive home, the importance of food safety, especially as young entrepreneurs coming up. We have to pay attention to food safety. Once you are manufacturing food for consumption by humans, you must pay attention to your manufacturing practices. And that is a point that we are trying to drive home here today. And now we have Mr. Faz Khan, the Director of the Chemistry, Food and Drug Division, who would give you an overview of their role with respect to food safety in Trinidad and Tobago. So I would like to invite Mr. Khan to present on CFDD's role. Mr. Khan?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Can you see my screen?
Yes, Faz, we're seeing your screen. You can... Sorry, a security alert just came up.
Yeah, I'm going to stop sharing and see what's the problem there. So I'm going to try again.
Let me know if you would like me to share, because I have the presentation up by me as well.
All right, let me try again. Okay, is it okay there?
Yes.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. And again, I'd like to extend congratulations to the exporTT Ministry of Trade for putting on this extremely important webinar on entrepreneurs related to food and food safety. So I'll go directly into the presentation. For some reason, I'm unable to move my screen. So Shana, you want the people to share to see?
Yes, not a problem. Let me share.
Okay, so I will stop sharing. I know what.
All right. Are you seeing there?
Okay, so next slide. Right, okay, so just to give a sense as to the Chemistry, Food and Drugs Division, and I know that most people who are in the food industry would have come across food and drugs at some point along their food production and food processing. The Commission for Food and Drugs is the regulatory body, and we are responsible for a number of different pieces of legislation that are directly related to food safety. Next slide. Okay, so these are the different pieces of legislation that are regulated by the Chemistry, Food and Drug Division. So you would see is a wide spectrum where we deal with food, drugs, and that is contained within the Chapter 3001 of the Food and Drug Act and Regulation. We also do have the Pesticides and Toxic Chemical Act and Regulation that covers a number of different commodity items, basically toxic chemicals and pesticides. You would recognize the relationship between pesticide and food safety, but there's a direct link between the use of products used in production or at the primary production or on the fields that would have an impact on food safety. What you put in there is going to have an impact in the final outcome of the product and whether you can even export to certain markets. Because within certain markets, certain pesticides are prohibited. And if it is found in your particular food, then obviously that particular product would be rejected and there'll be a recall, and then there'll be a cost associated with it, with that whole scenario. Next slide. Right. So our function is basically, as was alluded to the presentation by TTBS, to ensure safe quality goods of an acceptable standard for use by consumers with respect to food, drugs, cosmetic, and medical devices. So our role is primarily a regulatory role that ensures that any food that is produced in Trinidad and Tobago for human consumption, be it for the local market, as well as export market, satisfy the basic requirements for food safety. And as the presenter from Ms. Chutilal, I think, she made it clear in terms of how important food safety is, and having practical experience, I think she's really provided a very good oversight in terms of food safety and the necessity for food safety. It's not something nice to have, but it's a must. If it is you really want your product to gain market access, both at the local as well as regional and also international market. So the Commission for Food and Drugs via the Food and Drug Act and Regulation would regulate those commodities, and we're speaking about food here. Right, we can move to the other slide. Thanks. Right, so how do we do that? So within the Chemistry, Food and Drugs Division, you do have a cadre of individuals specialized in different competencies, all geared towards food safety. So we have food and drug inspectors, there are pesticide and toxic chemical inspectors, there are chemists, microbiologists, biochemists, scientific assistants, and also we do have clerical staff. So these cadre of individuals are there to support the regulation, and in doing so would support the industry in ensuring that food that are produced for human consumption meets the basic requirements and are safe for human consumption. The next slide. Right, so again, this gives a snapshot in terms of what we do, also the different competency. And I noticed some questions coming up about lab services. So I'll probably deal with that at a later time. And also, it is also critical to mention that as Trinidad and Tobago, we work in a global environment where what happens in one country would impact us wherever we are. And what we do in Trinidad would have an impact elsewhere. So we work closely, for example, with international bodies, for example, the National Codex Committee, Alimentarius, that are involved in developing standards internationally. And these standards are also recognized by WTO, the World Trade Organization, and often it is used in any sort of bilateral or multilateral agreements that is signed by government, and is seen as one one aspect of getting your product accepted in different markets. If it is you can comply with those basic requirements or basic standards as outlined within the Codex Alimentarius. I would advise that you also take a look at the Codex website. It's available to the general public. And again, it's going to give you more information, more knowledge on food safety. And it also deals with specific commodities in terms of specification, as regarding, for example, maximum residue levels. And we spoke about pesticides. We spoke things like cadmium in chocolate and cocoa. Again, Codex would recommend maximum levels of those heavy metals or impurities that is allowed to enter in different markets. So again, it gives you a wide spectrum of commodities, the specification and the requirements. Next slide. Okay, and later on, so these are some of the agencies that we have direct involvement or partner with. As food safety, as you would recognize, it starts as, and I think Ms. Chutlal mentioned it, from the farm to the fork. So it starts from there into your raw products until the finished processed product. So again, there's close collaboration between and amongst the different government agencies. For example, we have plant quarantine, we have public health, veterinary public health, and we also have the animal health production. So we work closely together to share information so that when we look at the chain, there's continuum in the chain and there's safety in all aspects of the chain of production from the farm to the fork. Next slide. Right, and I would mention probably a bit later in terms of the certificate of free sale. Now, in terms of food and the food industry, the food industry is one of the heavily regulated industry in the world. And we could well understand why this is such a heavily regulated industry. So if it is you're getting into food production, food processing, then you have to come to terms and understand that it's a heavily regulated industry. So it means that you can't produce something today, put it out in the market, and think you're going to get acceptance for your product on the market. Globally, the challenge faced by a lot of manufacturers include innovation, cost, quality, and food safety. Those are the three major challenges faced by the industry, as we live in a very competitive world. And if it is we are unable to produce a product that is innovative, if it is we are unable to produce a product that is cost effective, and if it is we are unable to maintain and sustain food safety within our processing, then obviously it would be difficult for us to remain in the food industry, in the food business. The market will drive you out of the market. So again, Commission for Food and Drugs is there to provide you with guidance and support as a regulator in assisting you in ensuring that your food meets the basic requirements of food safety. It is important to note, however, that food safety is a responsibility of you, the manufacturer. Food safety is not the responsibility of Chemistry, Food and Drugs, Public Health, Veterinary Public Health. No, the responsibility of food safety is the responsibility of the manufacturer. Next slide. Right, so as I was mentioning earlier, free sale certificate. This is one of the certificates that is commonly issued to the local manufacturers. And it basically ensures that once you have this certificate, it means that your product has satisfied the basic requirements of the Food and Drug Act and regulation. What we would ask for are these listed 8 Fs. So you have the local public health registration, which is issued by public health after an inspection is done. Food handler's badge is another requirement to issue the free sale certificate. Lab testing with respect to microbiology report, and also the chemistry part of the product, where we test for example, color, preservatives. That is extremely important into the producing a safe food. Like a label, the label must comply with the requirements. And again, we we have seen where labels are very deceptive, where the manufacturer knowingly, in most instances, and sometimes unknowingly put information on a label that is inaccurate, cannot be proven, and therefore it leads to issues with a label on the market, and it costs the manufacturer a great deal of money if he has to remove a product from the market because of incorrect labeling, and also delays his ability to reach to the market. And in his time in delaying to reach to the market, can another product reach to the market? So it's extremely important that we try to get it right the first time as best as possible. Look and read the regulation, be informed of the regulation so that you comply with the local regulation. And as mentioned earlier, in terms of international market, there are different labeling requirements. Again, you need to be familiar with those requirements, but there are differences. And in order to get into those markets, access to those markets, you must be able to satisfy those labeling requirements. And the last part in terms of a payment voucher, which is $75, is not a very costly exercise. The most costly activity there would be the testing, but it's absolutely necessary to verify that your product, in fact, is safe for human consumption. Next slide. Right, I think more or less, oh, right, just go back one more. Okay, so how can we assess exporters? And if it is you're interested in exporting to some foreign market, things like FSMA, which is the Food Safety Modernization Act of the US, which was passed in 2011. And if it is you're looking at that particular market, the US market, and even at the Canadian market also, they are also revamping their regulation and their requirement and putting more responsibility on the manufacturer to ensure that they produce food that is safe for human consumption. And within those international requirements and regulation, knowledge is important, and knowing what are the requirements. And part of their system of allowing your product to enter into their market is also inspection at your facilities. And as again, I go back to Ms. Shudila, where she mentioned documentation and record. You cannot have it in your head, because when the inspector comes, they cannot see what you would have done in the past, because the inspection is done at the point in time and also look at what happened in the past, and only documentation and record are the verifiable evidence that an inspector can determine or use to determine whether you met particular requirements. So don't leave it in your head. Although you have it in your head, that is good. It needs to be documented and record. If it is not documented, then it was not done. Regardless of how much you talk, how much you say, it would not be accepted by the inspector or by the certifying body or entity. Chemistry, Food and Drug, we issue export health certificate, free sale certificate, fish health certificate, and also country drug export license. That is for drugs. The GMP standard is a good starting point for a lot of the manufacturers, especially small manufacturers, because you're going to have certain challenges, and the GMP is going to give you basic guidelines to bring your processing as well as your product into compliance for safety and acceptability by consumers, and would prevent your product from being recalled from the market. And we can really imagine if there's a recall of your product from the market, then it loses confidence by the consumer. And to gain confidence is difficult, it's a challenge. So you really want to avoid those sort of missteps, and liaise with all of the different entities that are out there to assist you in bringing your product into market. Again, as I end, the food industry is one of the most heavily regulated industry worldwide, including Trinidad and Tobago. So again, we're here to support and give advice as best as possible. And in the final analysis, the responsibility is on the manufacturer to produce a food that is safe and wholesome for human consumption. I would like to end there, and thank you for your time. And these are the contact information if you need to get in contact with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Khan. Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Khan. I want to draw participants' attention to something Mr. Khan said to emphasize again that food is a heavily regulated industry, both in Trinidad and Tobago and globally. And another point he made is that food safety is a responsibility of the manufacturers. So once you are producing food, again, I emphasize it's important for you to be aware of what the regulations are and ensure that they are implemented in, implemented in your company. So moving straight on, we now have Mr. Neil Rampasad from the Public Health Division. He is the Chief Public Health Inspector at the Public Health Division, who would now be giving his presentation and an overview of their role. Mr. Rampasad?
Good afternoon, everyone, especially the young entrepreneurs. I'm going to get straight into the presentation. I want to keep it in the 10 minutes. However, you can keep the questions, and after the presentation, when the question time comes, we will try to answer your concerns. So I'm going to get straight into this presentation, and I'm going to link it to the GMPs. And I'm going to start off first with the food handler. So first, if we can go right, food under the Public Health Ordinance is any article, whether solid or liquid, cooked or uncooked, intended for human consumption and exposed or offered for sale. That is our authority. Once as food is offered for sale, we have all authority over that. For deposited for the purpose of sale or of preparation for sale. So Public Health Inspectorate would have the authority under this ordinance in terms of food safety. Next slide, please. Shana? Right, okay. Yes, and this is the legislation, Public Health Ordinance, Chapter 12, Number 4. And it is the sale of food stuff bylaws made under Section 156, right? Next slide. And these are the steps for the registration of the food handler. Now, you would be guided when you apply for a food badge. Remember, you are going to offer food for sale. When you apply for a food badge, it is guided by regulation. Now, this example that we put here, it will, remember we are a colony. This ordinance is about 100 years old, since 1917. So you will see like the town of Sandy Grande, maybe St. Anne's, Tacarigua. So when you see this here, these are just used as examples because you would have changed the boundaries, but this law still applies. So the bylaws are very clear in terms of the registration. And if we looked at the application for registration shall be made in each year and not later than the 31st of March thereof. Next slide, please. Right, so the first step is the application. So the food handler, well, must be registered, and every application for the registration of a food handler shall be in accordance to the form in Schedule 3. We'll give you an example of the 3 right after. To these bylaws and made not later than the 31st of March, which I just said, and that was in the law. Every Schedule 3 must be accompanied by a medical certificate from a registered medical practitioner, medical doctor, that the applicant is free from contagious or infectious disease or from any sore, eruption, or other affection of the body. So the medical practitioner will make an assessment of the food handler, look at you and see that anything is wrong. If your condition, if your health, it poses a risk to food safety, the medical practitioner will fill out that medical based on the fields that are requested on that medical form. And there's a specified medical form for that assessment. And every food handler, well, you're expected to attend a personal food hygiene lecture, which is done at the Public Health Inspectorate. Now, because of the COVID-19 situation and the restrictions, these food lectures are very limited. So it would not be the conventional way of doing it. I also want to underscore that COVID-19 is not classified as a foodborne disease. However, it is a novel virus, meaning new one. There are new things happening with this virus. So at this time, it is not classified as a foodborne disease. So keep that in mind. But it can be spread on the packaging of foodstuff, as what happened in New Zealand on the frozen foodstuff. And through that, when they imported the foodstuff, they got an outbreak, and it was linked to that imported contaminated foodstuff, and it was on the packaging. So you can Google that and get that information. Next slide, please. Right. The Schedule 3, this is the application form. And you will see now, as I said, St. Andrew, St. David, whatever. So based on the locality, the authority, this is how the application is worded. This would change sooner or later, but for now, it has not changed. So this is what we use based on the different areas. And you make this application. 2, if you're a food handler, let me explain something here now. If you are a food handler and you are living in Sandy Grande, but your operation is in Port of Spain, you have to apply for that food badge in Port of Spain because you are conducting business in that area. And the Port of Spain city would have their own type of regulations because that is a city. I didn't want to complicate this presentation, but the country is really divided into 2 key areas: urban areas like the cities and the boroughs, and the rural areas. That is like maybe Caroni, St. Andrew, St. David, Sandy Grande, Pinal, wherever. So if you're in a municipality, or if you're at a different county, let's say you are conducting business in Caroni, but you are living in Sandy Grande, you have to apply in the area, where the health authority for that area is located. So if it's in Caroni, it's the same with Caroni, County Medical Officer Health. In Couva, Caroni, you make your application there. Or if it's in the borough of Chaguanas, you will have to apply there. I hope I'm clear with that. Do not believe that you will be living somewhere else and you get your badge. Although a badge is a badge, we wouldn't want to, put your having 2 different badges because you are selling 2 different places does not make sense. The badge is essentially to ensure that you are examined and you are fit to handle food and you are educated. So based on policy and the areas that you're going to conduct the business, it is wise that you get your food badge in that area. Am I clear? Okay, so let's go to the next slide. Yes, next slide. All right, sorry about that. That would be health education. Now the health education is simply based on the WHO recommendation for the food handler. And basically, the health education will cover 5 key steps on cleanliness, hygiene. You want to separate raw and cooked food stuff. For example, you wouldn't want to store raw meat in a refrigerator above cooked food stuff because anything dripping from the raw could contaminate the cooked food stuff because cooked food stuff ready to eat. Of course, if you are cooking food stuff, you want to make sure that the temperature is reached, the internal temperature, whether it's chicken, whether it's pork, whether it's beef. If it does not reach that critical temperature, it would not be able to destroy the germs that could cause disease, which we term pathogens. A pathogen is simply a disease-causing organism. So if the temperature is not reached, it would not be sufficient to destroy these microbiological agents that if they survive, they can cause disease after you consume this product. Then that is the cooking thoroughly. And you keep food at safe temperatures. Ideally, cold food stuff should be kept refrigerated. That is less than 4 degrees Celsius. Some sites will show you different countries might say less than 5, but we accept less than 4 degrees. which is 40 degrees Fahrenheit. And then you want to store hot foods hot. So you go to a restaurant and they're offering food for sale, and you have a menu there. You want to know there's a warmer keeping the foods hot, whether it's the rice, whether it's the pilau, whether it's the meat stuff, you want it above 60 degrees Celsius, because at that temperature, that is where you can control microbiological growth. And of course, you must use safe water, right? If you use contaminated water, the risk is there to contaminate your foodstuff and spread disease. So let's go to the next slide. So step 2, yes, right, step 2. Once as you have attended the lecture, provided that medical certificate, and you are now completed the process in terms of what is required, you are given a Schedule 4, which is the certificate of registration. And this Schedule 4 is, Shana, you just want to go to the other slide? Right, this is what the Schedule 4 looks like, and it will certify that you are registered. Now, this is really the official certificate for you being registered as a food handler. However, let's go to the other slide. However, look at this. It shall be lawful for the local authority to issue badges denoting registration to all persons registered under this bylaw. Supplement the Schedule 4. For every badge issued under this bylaw, there shall be paid to the local authority a fee equivalent to the actual cost of the badge. So you will go to different municipalities or different counties or regions, and they will maybe have a different cost for the badge. Please comply with them, because they will have that costing in terms of the actual cost of the badge, and that is controlled by the local authority. So you pay the fee and you are issued what you call a food badge. I believe most people will know what a food badge is. Every food handler must have a food badge, basically. Let's go to the other slide, Shana. Right. Now, this is the steps for the registration of the food premises or the business. These are existing premises. So I will separate this from new businesses. So we'll just go through this quickly, and this will set the platform in terms of what is required for new businesses. Next slide, Shana. Next one. Right. This is the legal bylaws made of this registration of shops, right? Everybody, well, this is the law where it will tell you that you must be registered with the local authority. Number 2, every person keeping or intending to keep a retail shop, as set forth in the next preceding subparagraph, shall forthwith make application to the local authority for the registration of such shop or place. So wherever you are, that will be before Shana. You might have to go back to the other slide, the previous slide, right? Under 2, you will see it there, right? This is the legal authority that we have, that you will have to make that application and register. So the other slide, right? So registration process of food businesses. So the first step, you complete the application for the registration, which is the Schedule 1. So the next slide will show you the application form. Might be pretty old, but I believe it is legible. So this is the form that you will apply as a business operator or the owner, and you fill out this form and you lodge it with the local authority. So if your business is in Kearney, you fill out this form and you deposit this at the County Medical Officer Health Office in Couva, where it is located. And when you deposit that, they will then process it. So we go to the next stage, the registration process of food businesses. So step 2. So you made your application. We are assuming that you have a business running. So what is happening here now is that the inspector will take the application, the public health inspector that is, and he or she will visit your premises, and they will conduct an inspection of your premises based on is really a risk-based approach. And the risk-based approach, let me explain something about risk. Risk is a combination of probability by severity. So if I ask you, what is the risk of a shark biting you or me right now where we are located? I will tell you clearly, 0. The severity is grave. We could die if a shark should bite us now. But the risk is what? The likelihood is 0. We are not in the area where the shark is living. So the risk for shark biting us is simply 0. So what we do at these premises, we assess risk. We look at the likelihood, what it is we see, and then we quantify the risk. For instance, if we enter a kitchen and we are seeing a pipeline above the preparation area and condensation water is leaking onto the foodstuff, that is high risk. High risk. So you don't want that. A floor that may be dirty, yes, it poses a risk, but we will not put it as high risk as I just explained. So these are the type of ratings that we will use in terms of the assessment and inspection of the premises. So all this is inbuilt. So the inspector will look at things, they will ask questions, and they will gather information and make the assessment. And of course, document the information. So the assessment of the process flows, of course, what we look for is what we call a one-way flow. Now, depending on your business operation, a parlor is different from a roti shop, as a roti shop might be different from, let's say, a doubles kitchen, or you're manufacturing sweet drinks or soft drinks. What I'm trying to say here now, the assessment of the premises must be linked clearly to the business operation. And what we will look at the process flows and see that there is a one-way flow and there's no crisscrossing that could pose a risk to the contamination of the foodstuff. Once as the risks are identified and are addressed, well, then you are on the way to getting your premises registered. What the inspector will do, the inspector will guide the proprietor or the business operator in terms of what, if the requirements are okay, all right, he will give you the feedback. If they are not, he will give you a notice, an intimation notice telling you what you need to do, show you what it is he is concerned about so that you can do the improvement works so that you can get your premises registered. So I'm going along again. So because I want to stay within the 10 minutes, of course, you can ask me the questions afterwards and I will try to address them in detail. So once the premises is deemed to meet satisfactory requirements, the Schedule 2, which is the certificate of registration that Shana is showing right now on the screen, that is issued. So this is the certificate of registration. Now let us go now, and this is just an example, right? This is how it is done. Let us go now to pre-registration, and we have a lot of entrepreneurs here. You all will want to get into maybe coffee production, you name it, ice cream, poultry, roti shops, doubles, blue food, full restaurant setting. You want to get into preservatives. So all these different types of bottling coconut water, all these different types of processes will have to be discussed with the health department, what it is you are going to do. And of course, you're supposed to get, you just cannot build and construct your business operation just like that without the approvals. We have laws in this land, town and country, the local authority. So you advise that please seek to get the necessary prerequisites, the approvals, so that if you have to construct your premises, you would not be breaking the law. And the first thing I would advise that you should do, you consult the health department in the area that you intend to conduct the business operation. You discuss it with the health department, arrange an interview. They will guide you. You will submit a proposal. So for instance, if you want to do, again, a roti shop, you will sit with the person, tell them what it is, what your menu will be, and then the inspector, he or she, will guide you on what is expected. And it is based on 4 critical things. It's a simple food chain, source. So where are you getting your products from? So we're going to go outside a bit of GMPs, which is good manufacturing practices, and we're going to go into good agricultural practices if you're getting your raw food stuff, whether it's your vegetables, your green seasonings or whatever. So you want to know where the source is, and of course you should be buying food stuff from a reputable source and a safe source. And from when you get that, you have a chain. The next step, remember, safe source, first step. The other step is when you bring it into the establishment, and remember, this is going to be aligned with these process flows. So when you source your raw ingredients, you bring it into the establishment, the first thing you are going to do is to store it. If you are using meat stuff or items which would need refrigeration, you will need to have a wet storage. You will also have to have a dry storage, depending if you have flour, sugar, whatever other ingredients you have. So you look at storage, so source, then storage. Then from the storage, you are going to preparation. That is when you will start to prepare whether the meat stuff, wash the vegetables, whatever, in terms of whatever menu you may have. And from that, your cook step, which is also part of the preparation, when you are finished, that then you get it out now to the public in the sales or distribution, and that is safe serving. So there are 4 stages. So this is what the inspector will really be looking at, depending on what your business operation is about. And they will be looking to assess the risk and guide you on how to lay out the premises. Crisscrossing is not really permitted because this encourages risk. It increases the risk that you will take. You're touching dirt, you're coming from a dirty area, you're going to a clean area. If I may ask you, after you have cooked the food and it is there now, it is ready to dish out, that area, if I ask you a question, but I know you would not be able to respond right now. If it's a clean area or a dirty area, I am certain you all will say clean, and you are right. So the clean area, when that food is clean, you don't want somebody coming from a dirty area, right? You now preparing the raw chicken and you walking in and there to touch up the finished product. So you have to be very careful about the process flows, and this is what the inspector is looking for, and a whole number of things. So because of time, I'm going to go down again, and I hope I'm getting my message across. Shana, the next slide. Right. So the registration now, way before good manufacturing practices were standardized now, and it became a standard. This is what the Public Health Inspectorate, we have aligned with based on good, solid science. Another thing I want to underscore, you cannot go onto any website, and everybody is an expert in terms of giving advice on food safety. You must align food safety with good, solid science. You have the Codex, you have the ISO standards, you could go to the EU standards, and it must be at that level where you'll be guided by good, solid science, and not somebody else giving you some different advice, and then you contradict what is expected. The Codex standards are pretty high, and they are aligned to what you call HACCP, Hazard Analysis Critical Control Points. To really achieve that level, you really have to, it's a very high scientific approach to this food safety. But just below that, you would have the good manufacturing practices coming in, the good hygiene practices, the good agricultural practices. All these are prerequisites to reach the HACCP standard. The HACCP standard basically ensures that the food is safe and there is no need for endpoint testing of your product. If you follow a rigid HACCP program, you don't need to send your food for sampling once as you are complying with these things. That is why if you have a rigid HACCP program, you can get into international markets, and that is what FARS and the Chemistry, Food and Drugs is about. So we, at the inspection aspect, we might be below because we are still, our legislation is a bit older. But we are trying to keep up to date and align it with what is really required for food safety, because I just want to underscore another thing. According to the WHO, food that is not safe is not considered food. So keep that in mind. So all these things here that Adrian would have gone through, FARS would have probably touch on all these things too. These are here. So we should go to the other slide, Shanna. So the location, again, you don't want to environmentally polluted area. You wouldn't go and set up a food premises next to a landfill site or a pig pen or a farming area where you're subject to flies and all these other pollutants, right? And then rodents, area subjected to flooding, etc. So this is supposed to be self-explanatory. Could we go to the next slide? Premises, the equipment. Again, contamination is minimized, proper maintenance, cleaning, disinfection. Just want to underscore that disinfection is a higher level of sanitizing, right? 99.9%. After above disinfection, you have sterilization, that is 100% kill. So disinfection of high-touch surfaces, as we are doing right now with the COVID, and I could give you a crude solution we can make, and this is for solid surfaces, that use 5 tablespoons of 5 to 6% hypochlorite bleach, which is the household bleach, per US gallon, which is 3.8 liters. So 5 tablespoons. Now 1 tablespoon is equivalent to 3 teaspoons, and a teaspoon is 5 mils. So 3 tablespoons is going to be 15 mils. So 5 is 75 mils. 75 mils for 3.8 liter. So 5, and you make that mixture, you leave it to stand for a while, and after you do your wiping of your hard surfaces, your countertops, etc., you apply this disinfecting agent for a good 99% plus kill. Of course, your premises must be protected against pests, harborage. You mustn't have rat holes and underground entrances into the kitchen where rats could run through. Next slide, Shanna. The layout, it must permit good manufacturing practices. I was talking about that. The simple flow from the source to the storage to the preparation and finally to the serving. Right? So we go to the other one, Shanna. Right. And of course, the construction. Now, a kitchen is where you will have a wet operation. You might use heat, open flame. So it must be of a fireproof material. When we use the word impermeable, we mean that the material is waterproof. Nothing can soak into it, right? Like for instance, stainless steel, you could throw water on that, that's an impermeable surface. And these are the type of surfaces you will want. The floor should be impervious again, non-slip, suitably graded so that you wouldn't have accumulation of water, the ceiling, etc. If I ask you now, should we put a ceiling, let's say a stainless steel ceiling? And I know you cannot answer me again now, but if there's a change in temperature, what will happen to that ceiling? You have hot and cold. You're going to have condensation on that. It's because metals transmit heat. So it becomes cooler faster and it heats up faster. So you don't want no metal sealing. So you're looking at something, maybe concrete on the side of the top floor, concrete, a smooth concrete finish, maybe a good hardwood finish. And of course, they talk about impervious, smooth, easy to clean, right? Go to the other slide, Shanna. Of course, the facility, storage. When we talk about suitable and adequate lighting, the lighting must, under the Occupational Safety and Health Act, the lighting must be suitable for the purpose so that you can see. So when you're in the kitchen, you're preparing food stuff, so you want an adequate amount of light. And you really need, as the science will say, overlapping pools of light so that there are no dark spots. So that also you have to be careful with fluorescent lighting in a food establishment, because if you have anything, any piece of equipment turning, and you have fluorescent, you will have something called a stroboscopic effect, where it will be turning and it may appear to be in slow motion, and you can cause injury to yourself, right? If you underestimate what is going on with that. So you really need overlapping pools of light so that you can see the work surfaces. About 500 lux is recommended. And you want to make sure that whatever you are doing, you can make a proper assessment of what you are doing. And drainage, of course, you don't want no accumulation of water in there. Solid and liquid waste, make sure you have a bin to collect all the waste generated, to package it and get it out as soon as possible. There are many other things we could speak about, right? You want to go to the next slide, Shanna? All the arrangement of the toilet facilities, all this, but because of the 10 minutes, we cannot go into all that. All these requirements basically is to ensure that food is safe for human consumption. Or if I want to extend it, if you're looking for a certificate of free sale and you want to get into the international market, it is to ensure that food is safe and can be traded. And that is where you will have to align with the Codex standards. And then FARS and Chemistry, Food and Drugs, you will need to get those type of certification so that you could get into the export markets. And I'm hoping that the audience that we have here today, these young entrepreneurs, right, you all are looking to align with higher level production. Because if we could get into the export markets, it could address several things in this country. Employment, you know, we are aligned to the Sustainable Development Goals. We have you know, poverty, to reduce poverty because you will be employed, and you know, you generate foreign income. And that, I mean, not only that, we are looking even at the tourism. Whatever you're getting into, even if you are supplying the local tourist industry, you have to be very careful, because you do anything with your food stuff and you create, or you are the cause of some event that will result in a foodborne disease outbreak, reputation is done. The tourist industry, in terms of that, whether it's a hotel or whatever it is, the reputation is going to be compromised. So we don't want that. So all the reasons to comply with all these standards and the good manufacturing practices, this is the platform at least which we could use and help achieve this whole goal. Finally, once as you have built your premises and satisfied the requirements of the Public Health Inspectorate, and your premises now would be assessed after, this is for the new businesses. Once as you are okay, you will apply on the Schedule 1. The inspector will visit your premises, and if the business operation is satisfactory, which we hope that you will comply with, the Schedule 2 is issued. So your business operation is registered. This is a prerequisite to working towards the certificate of free sale, which FARS and Chemistry, Food and Drugs will ask of the Public Health Inspectorate that for persons looking for the certificate of free sale, you will have to have these certification before you get into that. So I will end here, and I thank you all very much. I believe I went over time, but I humbly apologize for that. And I will be here waiting to take any questions later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rampasad. And we're almost at the end. We now have Mr. Kristen Maraj from exporTT, who would give a brief overview of the type of support that they can offer to entrepreneurs, especially in relation to food safety. Kristen?
Sure. Thank you, Shana, and good morning, everyone. Just bear with me because my presentation disappeared. All right. All right, Gavin, could you share my slide? I'm not seeing it to share now. This is weird. Thank you. Thanks, Gavin. All right, so good morning all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to briefly give you an overview of what it is that we can support with at exporTT. And this would be tied into everything that was discussed this morning in terms of your food safety and your GMPs, but also to add to other services that can help your company as you go through this. So next slide, please, Gab. And right after that. Okay, so this is about the research and development facility. So what this facility is that it is a service that can help to provide financing, counterpart funding for you, for development of your innovation within your company. And this actually falls under the theme 4 of the 2030 framework of the government of Trinidad and Tobago to build competitive business. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is geared at companies who are looking at innovations within their process or their product or service. So we're talking about innovation for these two areas can apply for this. And these are not just projects like inventions. We're talking about projects that have commercial viability and more so export viability, because everything we do at exporTT is export oriented. And we want to work with entrepreneurs like yourselves to get you to the point where you are established exporters. So this is the step that would help you here with the innovation of your product. Mr. Khan spoke about it earlier, and Ms. Chowtilal as well spoke about the sort of innovation that they did in their company that goes hand in hand with the food safety. So, yeah, Gavin, you can take the next slide. So how it works is that companies can apply for either a phase 1 or phase 2 of this grant. Phase 1 will help you to establish your technical merit or your commercial viability for your project. So this essentially is your feasibility study. And that phase 1, you can access 70% of the total costs to a limit of 100,000 TT dollars for this phase 1 week. You can also apply off the bat for phase 2 if you wish, if you think you have enough feasibility established and are going into your new product or service development. So this would fund 50% of the cost of this project to a maximum of 750,000 TT. So what this means is that to max out the 750, you need to have at least a $1.5 million project, essentially. And this will help, of course, with the technical assistance that you need to get this innovation done. So this will cover technical costs if you need to get consultants on board, persons to help you develop testing, that kind of work. Phase 3 is $150,000, but you wouldn't be able to access that until you have been successful and have implemented your phase 2, which is the new product development itself. So this is the commercialization of that product. So essentially, if you want to apply to exporTT, we'll be looking at a phase 1 or a phase 2. Next slide, please, Gavin. Right, so how it works is that when applications come into exporTT, it goes to a committee, which is not internal to exporTT. So it comprises exporTT, who chairs this committee, the Ministry of Trade, the Ministry of Finance, and the Ministry of Planning and Development. It's a 4-member committee that goes through evaluation. When you apply at exporTT, we can give you support to build a strong application to take to the committee. And we also we chair that particular committee. Next slide, please, Gavin. Okay, so we're going to talk about the grant fund facility. So this is available to companies that have been in business and have been a going concern for at least 1 year. And the purpose of this grant is to access equipment that you need for your increased production. And production for the purpose of becoming a better exporter, or to have the capacity, the production capacity to improve your ability to provide an import substituting product. So how this works is that it's 50% of this equipment cost to a limit of 250,000 TT. Next slide, please, Gavin. So some of the areas, some of the sectors that are covered include the financial services, maritime services, everything we have listed here, as well as creative, agricultural, and agro-processing, and manufacturing. So it's a broad range of sectors that can apply for this. Next one, please, Gavin. Okay, and similarly, this is done by a multi-agency evaluation company chaired by the Ministry of Trade and Industry, Ministry of Finance, exporTT, and the Exim Bank. So this application will be taken to this committee for approval, well, for recommendation for approval, which will then be taken to the Minister of Trade for the final approval. Once that approval is done, exporTT will disburse funds to your suppliers as per the agreement and as per the approval. Next one, please, Gavin. Okay, so this is the steel pan grant, the steel pan manufacturing grant fund facility, which is in the similar vein of the grant fund facility, but this is specifically for steel pan manufacturers. So I don't know if there may be many of you here at this webinar right now who are steel pan manufacturers or tuners, but this is geared towards them. And if you have any colleagues, you could pass on this information to them. So this is a bit different to the grant fund facility in that companies within this industry can access machinery, equipment, software, tools, raw material, and training. And the companies can access $250,000 per tranche of this grant. I wouldn't really get into too much detail of this, but with us we have Mr. Braffett, and yeah, Mr. Braffett, who'll be able to guide you along, and we'll pass on the contact information. You can skip the next few slides, please, Gab. You can skip that as well. All right, so I want to talk about co-financing. So co-financing is essentially financial support that we'll give you at exporTT for export-related activities. So we spoke a lot about product testing this morning. We also touched on label design and modification for the sake of export. Those things are available. The financial support is there under the co-financing service of exporTT. How it works is that companies can access 50%, they can be reimbursed 50% of some of these export-related activities, all of which are listed here, and it's on our website, and I'll share my contact info, to a limit of $35,000 annually per company. So it covers things like shipping of samples, the testing of products, first-time website development. So if you all need to work on getting your online presence, you could also contact us, and we could go through how you go about applying for that. Website development as well as e-commerce functionality, of course, because I mean, given the whole pandemic right now, that might be a way to pivot that you might be looking at. Your online sales and e-commerce, business to business and business to consumer e-commerce, and we could give you some support there. So these are some of the things that can be covered. We have trade show participation as well, but I don't know if that'll be applicable right now. Trade shows and so on. But next year, feel free to check us on that. Next one, please, Gavin. Right. So this is tied directly to the conversation that happened this morning. This is the support that we can give you to meet international standards. So we provide training at exporTT, firstly, that can help you to work towards getting the international standards. So in the past, we have done the Food Safety Modernization Act training, HACCP and GMP training for companies. But beyond that, next slide, please, go. But beyond that, we can help you meet these international standards. So we spoke about GMP this morning, spoke about HACCP, the ISO standards that you need to meet for your food safety. There's also the FSSC 22000. And of course, there is the Food Safety Modernization Act that you have to comply with to be able to export to the US. So how we can help you as an entrepreneur right now is that you can access 50% of these costs. So the technical costs of getting this implementation done, we could help you with 50% of that to a limit of 50,000 TT. Next slide, please, Gavin. I'm not sure if we have one. Right, so this is my contact information here. I kept it brief. The plan was actually to go into a bit more discussion, but we could save that for the Q&A. And we'll share these presentations with you. And this is my contact information here. Note my cell number. If I cannot take your call at any time, I do respond to WhatsApp. So if I'm a meeting or a presentation or anything, feel free to leave a WhatsApp and I'll get back to you. So thank you very much for your attention this morning and for being with us this morning.
Thank you very much, Kristen. That was a great presentation, giving a very nice synopsis of the services that exporTT offers. We are now into the question and answer session, and we have our panelists who have their cameras on and will try to assist. We have 1 or 2 questions in the chat that I would make reference to. So Chanel Diaz asked if, Mr. Rampersad, and you could advise, if you have a branch in San Fernando and then you open a branch in Port of Spain, do you need to have a food badge for both places?
No, absolutely not. What you will need to have is that if you have employees there, the employees who are assigned to that branch, they must have the food badge from that municipality or that region. So if it's Port of Spain and you have employees there, you will need to have those employees there registered with the Port of Spain, because most likely they will not be moving. If you are the manager and you are moving, you just need 1 food badge. In fact, persons in this country, we just need 1 food badge. It's just that if you are conducting your business in one area and you are there assigned, you will need to have that badge for that particular municipality region. Am I clear on what I said?
Okay, Ms. Diaz, if you have any more questions, you can let us know. Yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Rampersad. Ms. Marva Mitchell asked, Mr. Khan, is the Food and Drug Services opened at this time, given the current restrictions?
Okay, so we do a limited accessibility service at this point in time, but yes, we are open. The inspectors at the office Monday to Friday. So you can access the services physically. Also, you can even call or email to get advice, or if there's any issues, you can make contact via those means, and we should be able to provide you with some degree of assistance. The only thing that we are a bit constrained, right, is the actual inspection. So that is our challenge right now, conducting actual inspection due to we all understand the situation. So that is one challenge that we do have at this point in time.
Mr. Khan, we also had another question from Ms. Vanessa Leith. Is the food badge being issued in Port of Spain presently?
All right, so I think that probably Neil can answer that question.
Yes,
Mr.
it
Ampersand?
is. Yes, it is. And if somebody is having a challenge with that, just let us know, and we'll make that arrangement. Because the Port of Spain City Corporation, they are still issuing food badges, as I know.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Rampasad. Okay, so we have Mr. Davon Samlal Singh, the green bartender, joining us here today as well. He wanted to find out that, well, basically there is a site I have in mind to make a bigger kitchen. It's in renovation. From the inspection standpoint, is there any way for it to be inspected and recommendations given to get it up to par for all standards? So given that he is currently renovating, would he be able to have someone look at the premises to see if he's doing the correct thing?
Ideally, yes. And this is the best stage to make the recommendation, because you don't want to invest money and then you do something that would not be in compliance with public health standards. So absolutely, yes. Give us the information and we'll make arrangements. But of course, with the COVID regulations for now, and we will just try to, we'll see how we can assist. Because
Okay,
I know
so
right now, renovation might be a challenge, right? So, but we will assist, definitely.
So, Mr. Samlal Singh, what you can do is you can reach out to me. I will leave my email, my contact information up. In fact, let me share the screen. I'll leave my contact information, and this applies to everyone. If you all have any questions, you can feel free to email us. I'm putting up the contact information for everyone on the screen as well. We had some other questions. Okay, so someone asked, sorry, excuse me 1 second. Miss Danielle Bridgewater asked, she indicated that she's situated in Carenage on a hill. Would that be a bad factor for the public inspectors, Mr. Rampasad?
Firstly, but on a hill, in terms of what business operation are you conducting there? That shouldn't really bias. Once as you have proper drainage, once as the location is not near to any source of contamination or any risks as we identify in the GMPs. Right? Once as we assess that and you satisfy those conditions, being on a hill, unless you have challenges with waste disposal, toilet facilities, etc., that may be the only challenging factors. Otherwise, being on a hill, we really have to assess that, to do a site visit. So if we get more information, we could probably make a judgment call.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rampasad. Trisha B asked, how is the GMP tied to the FSPCA regulations? Adrian, Mr.
Let me try. Let me try something, and Adrian, correct me if I'm wrong. The FSPCA is tied to the to having your Food Safety Modernization Act and your USDA requirements for entry. That Food Safety Modernization Act is built along the lines of not HACCP, but HAPC, which is like HACCP Plus. Now, to get HACCP, you need to have your GMPs. The GMPs is for your infrastructure and your production space. HACCP, HAPC, FSMA is for your process itself. So the GMP is actually your first step before actually complying with any of the FDA, FSMA sort of requirements. I might be completely wrong, Adrian, so you can help me out there.
No, you're completely correct. Yes.
Thank you.
Just to add to exactly what Christian said, the GMP are the prerequisite programs, or the programs on which you're going to build your HACCP program, or the requirements of the FSMA, which deals with preventive control. and identification of critical control points that require some sort of preventive control. So the GMP is the first step and is considered the prerequisite program to any other system that you want to engage in or develop.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cannon. We have one question for you here as well. With respect to chemistry, food and drug applications, are there any provisions for online applications, especially given the restrictions? This is from Shanice Charles, Dear Diet Enterprises.
Okay, so yes, an application can be emailed under this situation, and we'll address the email and the content of the email. However, at some point in time, the physical label must be brought in to us. But yes, we can address some of this issue via email and via online system.
Okay, and I have a question from Crystal Phillips. Is there a preset template / guidelines for various food processing businesses? Well, I will try. You'll add it. Basically, the GMP provides an overarching set of guidelines for any businesses that produce food. So I think it's a good place to start in terms of looking at what the GMP standard is and seeing how you can implement those particular requirements in your company.
And in terms of product specification of different types of products, the Food and Drug Act and regulation do contain requirements specific to class of food products. They can use that as a guide in terms of what the product ought to have or should have in terms of the ingredients. Codex also a good place if it's looking for product specification. Codex Alimentarius also can give you guidelines in terms of what are the limits in particular products and based on that class of products. So yes, through the Food Act and regulation as well as Codex can be a source of information.
And these, just to add, these things, these acts are available online. So it's something that you could research. And especially if you're now starting your food safety journey in your company, getting hold of these regulations, these local regulations, it's a very good place to start for your company. So that way you have an idea in terms of what is required. And I think we have a very nice question here to end off our question and answer session. Miss Jewel Joseph asked, what is the cost of the TTBS GMP standard? So there is a hard copy available. There is a PDF version available on TTBS's website. Adrian, could you advise us on the cost of it?
The cost is $152 TT dollars.
100 and how much, sorry?
152.
All right, so it's $152 for those interested in purchasing it, and it's available on TTBS's website. So I think that is it in terms of the questions. I have put up on the screen our contact information. My email address, shannon.ramas@gov.tt, is there. If there are any further questions that you all have, or you wish to reach out to the Chemistry, Food and Drug Division, exporTT, or TTBS directly, their contact information and their email addresses are there as well. I would like to extend a big thank you to all of our presenters today. I think they had some very good information which was shared with the participants. I hope you all would be able to make use of the information that was presented today. And like I said, we are here to answer any further questions you may have. exporTT is there to provide any assistance with respect to starting you on this journey if you're interested in it. So thank you very much to our presenters and to our participants. And I wish you all a very productive day. And everyone, please stay safe. Thank you for joining us.